ourselves. Let's turn now back to the long-awaited release of the Robert Mueller report. President Trump is claiming total exoneration after the partially redacted document was released to Congress and the public, but maybe he didn't read the whole report. The special counsel says there is insufficient evidence anyone affiliated with the Trump campaign engaged in criminal conspiracy with the Russians, but it also details what even some Republican critics are assailing as a culture of lies at the White House and unethical actions on the Trump campaign on the subject of possible obstruction of justice by the president. Mueller did not come to a conclusion. He seemed to leave it up to Congress to decide. And joining me now, President Trump's personal attorney, the former mayor of New York City, Rudy Giuliani. Mr. Mayor, first of all, happy Easter.
Happy Easter, Jim.
Thank you so much for being here. You said on Thursday that the rebuttal to the Mueller report is, quote, ready to go, and you expect to release it after the weekend. Your colleague, Jay Sekulow, said he doesn't expect that you will need to put out a rebuttal at all. Clear this up for us. Are you going to release a rebuttal?
We were ready to go if we thought that a lot of the issues were left open, too open. Right now, they seem to be okay, but we're ready to put it out when we have to.
But you're not necessarily going to put it out?
I think the odds are it'll get out at some point. For example, you have testimony coming up. I know that the Attorney General is going to testify. I know that Mueller is going to testify. I assume people like McGahn will testify. I'm not sure. But there'll be a point at which we'll put it out. And then
but not tomorrow?
Not tomorrow. Not the next day. Then we'll see. We'll see what happens.
I want to start off also by saying, congratulations. The Mueller report concluded that there is insufficient evidence that the president or anybody in his team conspired criminally with the Russians. That's good news. But I guess I'm confused as to the president and you both embracing that part of the Mueller report and then calling, in the president's words, BS the rest of the rest of the report. And he didn't actually say BS.
BS is not quite a legal term, but
right.
It's a term that most people understand.
But how can you criticize and embrace at the same time?
Here's the difference, because first of all, overview. This is a prosecutor's document, 400 pages, the prosecutor's view. And then a prosecutor, which I think people would grant, had a lot of people that were somewhat biased against the president.
I don't know that everybody would grant that, but okay, that's your opinion.
If you have somebody there who's a key prosecutor who was chief counsel to the Clinton Foundation, my goodness, that isn't much of a stretch. But in any event, a lot of things are left out. A lot of things are false. I shouldn't say a lot of things. Some things are false. A lot of things are questionable.
What's false?
Well, a lot of what they recite what Cohen said as if it's the truth. Cohen's incapable of telling the truth.
Well, what specifically is in the report?
I'll tell you what's specifically in the report. That Cohen, that we dangled a pardon in front of Cohen. We did not dangle a pardon in front of Cohen. And his lawyer is willing to testify that we didn't. They didn't bother to include that in the report, which is clear refutation of what he said. Nor do they list all of the things that go to Cohen's credibility that would cast a doubt on everything he's saying. It was not a fair report. It wasn't like the normal prosecutor. When you find that a person didn't commit the crime, you then go look at the hypothesis of how did it come about, how did it start. No examination of how could the FBI have started an investigation of a presidential candidate based on those 10 words that were said to Papadopoulos. Don't indicate any involvement by the candidate. Normally what the FBI would do is warn the candidate, like they did with Feinstein when she had a communist spy on her staff. No delving into that. It's clear that they tried very, very hard to create a case that the president was involved in Russian whatever. Couldn't do it. They tried 100 different ways. They put Manafort in jail. They put him in solitary confinement.
Right.
They questioned him 13 times. He wouldn't give them the information 13 times. They tried to crack people. There's no question they prosecuted Flynn, not because Flynn did anything wrong. They created what Flynn did wrong.
But this was
and then they prosecuted him to crack him.
This is an investigation into Russian election interference, right? Russian attempted interference in the election.
Well,
there are Russians that have been indicted.
I have no problem with investigating Russian interference in an election.
But there are Russians who are indicted.
But that's not the reason this was a big story. This is a big story because they said that the man who got elected president of the United States was conspiring with the Russians in that interference, which is close to treason. Man, that's what made it a international story.
There are people
Russians
on the
have been
campaign who were
interfering.
talking to Russians, right?
Russians, yeah, and there were people on Hillary's campaign that were talking to Ukrainians. The reality is, you think this is the first time the Russians have interfered in an American election?
No, it's definitely not. But let me ask you a question, because Mitt Romney put out a statement saying that he was, quote, appalled that, among other things, fellow citizens working in a campaign for president welcomed help from Russia, including information that had been illegally obtained. that none of them acted to inform American law enforcement. It's good news that there is insufficient evidence, but what about the willingness?
I could tell you the things he wanted to do.
That Rudy Giuliani,
that guy wanted to do. Come on.
What do you mean, the things that
Stop the bull. Stop the bull. Stop this pious act that you weren't trying to dig up dirt on people, putting dirt out on people.
Who, Mitt Romney?
When he was running for president, I ran against him.
Right.
So did John McCain run against him.
But he wasn't accepting information from foreigners.
I don't know if he was accepting information from foreigners. Who says that the president accepted information from foreigners? You mean people on his campaign might have done it?
First of all, the Trump Tower meeting, I think, is what he was referring to, the willingness to sit down with Russians offering dirt on Hillary Clinton. That is what Mitt Romney seems to be talking about.
What a hypocrite.
But why is that
any candidate in the whole world, in America, would take information negative
from a foreign source? From a hostile foreign source?
Who says it's even illegal? Who says it's even illegal? And does the information turn out to be false, by the way? The information that was gleaned and disseminated, every newspaper printed it. Why did the Washington Post print the information that came from a foreign source when they knew it was hacked? Aren't they just as wrong for doing that as the campaign wanting to use it?
Why do you think Mitt Romney is a hypocrite if he is
because Mitt Romney did things very similar to that.
Taking information from Russians?
No. There's nothing wrong with taking information from Russians.
There's nothing wrong with taking information.
It depends on where it came from. It depends on where it came from. You're assuming that the giving of information is a campaign contribution. You read the report carefully. Mm-hmm. The report says we can't conclude that because the law is pretty much against that. People get information from this person, that person,
so you would have accepted information from Russians against a client, against a candidate if you were running in the presidential election?
I probably wouldn't. I wasn't asked. I would have advised, just out of excess of caution, don't do it. I'll give you another thing.
But you're saying there was nothing wrong with doing that.
There's no crime.
I'm not talking about crime. I'm talking about.
We're going to get into morality?
Yeah.
Well, that isn't what prosecutors look at, morality.
No, but that's what Mitt Romney. But that's what Mitt Romney is referring to.
But this didn't become an international scandal because of immorality. It became an international scandal because the president was accused of violating the law falsely, and now nobody wants to try to figure out who did it because that's the real wrongdoing here. And the reality is.
But you don't think this is immoral or unethical to take?
Well, suppose help? I do.
Yeah.
I'm going to prosecute people for immoral.
I'm not talking about the.
I'm going to go look at I'd like to take a good look at Romney's campaign and see if there were any immoral or unethical things done by the people working for him that he didn't know about. If there weren't, then it was the only campaign in history because he's maybe as holier than the holiest one. There's no campaign in history that hasn't done that.
You think that there shouldn't be a high standard for the President of the United States that he not...
You are mixing up two things.
Ethics and law is what I'm...
Number one. Number two, you're mixing up what happens at this level of campaign and what the candidate knows about.
Well, I mean, this level was the campaign chairman, the president's son, and the president's son-in-law.
But it wasn't the president. It was not the president.
But that's not a low level. That's a high level, the campaign chairman and his son and son-in-law.
People other than the candidate.
Right.
People other than the candidate. The question is, did Donald Trump, let's call that collude with the Russians? The answer is he didn't collude with them, he didn't conspire with them, he didn't coordinate with them, and all of that was run against him. Wait now. Yeah. All of that was run against him, 2 FBI investigations has found out to be false. And now that it's over.
Well, insufficient evidence.
And now.
Insufficient evidence.
Well, no, not on collusion.
Right. They said they could not find they could not find sufficient evidence of criminal conspiracy.
They couldn't find a single piece of evidence for anything. Hacking, dissemination.
It's an entire volume of evidence. It just doesn't rise to criminality.
There's an entire volume of stuff. Not of evidence.
You can call it stuff, but Mitt Romney obviously finds it offensive that fellow citizens working on a campaign welcomed help from Russia.
But you're quoting Mitt Romney like he's an unbiased source. This man has a whole history of awful things said about Donald Trump, including he's morally unfit to be president, before he ever knew anything about it.
You just said you wouldn't accept help from the Russians if you were
I don't know if I would or I wouldn't. The legal advice I would give is out of an excess of caution, don't do it. But maybe that's informed somewhat by what is going on right now and what we've learned since then. The reality is you're picking on a minor point when the major point is he was pursued for years for a false charge. 2 FBI investigations, one with 4 affidavits for electronic surveillance that turn out to be fraudulent. That's a big crime. Now, it turns out he didn't do it. Isn't anybody in the media interested in how did this happen? Is this just an accident?
With the investigation into the president, how did it happen?
Yeah.
We know the
No, you don't know.
The volume.
No, you don't. You
lays
never
out the
investigate.
detail of how and why it started.
No, they didn't.
It started with George Papadopoulos and somebody
You
approaching him.
You never would have started an investigation of a major party candidate, based on a
The DNC was hacked, and John Podesta was spearphished, and all these emails were illegally.
But those two things are disconnected. Trump had nothing to do with that. No,
they're not disconnected. That's what they were investigating. Russian election.
You're fighting it so hard.
I'm just pointing out the facts in the report.
But there's a prejudice. I got to tell you, it's just assumed that anything about him we're going to magnify it, and anything about the other side we don't look at. The whole situation with Papadopoulos, to a trained investigator, is extremely, unbelievably suspicious. The man is given one little piece of information. The Russians have Hillary Clinton's by a Maltese counterintelligence guy.
Okay. By Mifsud.
Yeah. And then he repeats it a month later to an Australian guy with a very shady background, big contributor to Hillary Clinton, even though he's an Australian.
Contributor to Hillary Clinton, he's an Australian. You can't contribute
I think he's a citizen now. Not illegal. He raised money for her, helped to get money. To the foundation. I'm sorry.
To the Clinton Foundation. Can I ask you a question about Don McGahn?
Wait, no, I want to finish the thought. It's a really important thought. That man is told the same information that Mifsud gave him. And all it says is the Russians
have information, these emails from Hillary Clinton.
That does not justify.
But it was true, and it was an attack on the United States.
But it doesn't justify an investigation of Donald Trump as candidate for president of the United States. There is right now as much evidence that Obama may have known about the Steele dossier and affidavits as Trump might have known about that. In fact, more, because there's a text between Strzok and Page.
I don't know anything.
Saying, yes, you do. Strzok and Page said the administration.
Obama knew.
They said the Obama administration is on top of this.
I want to go.
I didn't say he knew.
Yeah.
I said there's evidence that would suggest you should follow it up and find out.
Okay.
I will investigate him.
I want to ask you, because you've been talking about Don McGahn.
If we did that, this place would go crazy.
I want to talk about Don McGahn, because the question of obstruction of justice is the second volume of
Correct.
this report. In one of the examples of potential, and it doesn't reach a conclusion, it kicks it to Congress, obstruction of justice has to do with President Trump directing White House counsel at the time, Don McGahn, to have Rod Rosenstein fire the special counsel. You said that account from McGahn was, quote, inaccurate. Now, McGahn's attorney responded saying, quote, "It's a mystery why Rudy Giuliani feels the need to relitigate incidents that the Attorney General and Deputy Attorney General have concluded were not obstruction, but they are accurately described in the report." So McGahn is standing by his account, as Mueller, the account of that President Trump told him to get rid of Bob Mueller.
Have you read page 117, 118 of the report? I would ask, which of the three versions is McGahn standing by? There are three versions he gives of that account. Mm-hmm. Version number one, which we put in the New York Times, which maybe he did.
No, let's just stick to what's on the Mueller report.
It's all in the report. Mm-hmm. I'll get out 117 if you want. Mm-hmm. They do recite it, but then they select the version most harmful to the president. Version number one.
But which part do you dispute? Which one?
I have to explain it. Mm-hmm. The first version that he says is, the president told me to fire him because he was upset about conflict of interest, and I told him I'd resign. Version number one.
Right.
He then corrects it and says, "Oh, mistake. He never said fire, and I never told him I'd resign."
He said get rid of him.
There's an intermediate step.
He can't be special
counsel.
He
said he has conflicts, and he shouldn't be special counsel.
He shouldn't be special counsel. Well, what does that convey to you? What does that suggest to you?
It's far different than fire. Fire is nice and clear. Fire is get rid of him.
He shouldn't be special counsel.
He shouldn't be special counsel means it's wrong that he's special counsel. It doesn't say any specific action. Well, then he changes it again and says, well, I thought that meant get rid of him.
That's what he thought it meant.
Well, okay, but that isn't what he said.
So you're not denying that he said he shouldn't be special counsel. You're denying that he meant fire him.
The point I was making is he has three different versions. Now, you tell me as a trial lawyer, what would I do with that in front of a jury? Mm-hmm. Guy's got three different versions of something as important as this. You know what you do? You say, I can't rely on him.
Said Mueller has to go, I think is the exact quote. Mueller has to go.
One version of it is he has conflicts and he shouldn't be special counsel. Quote, those are in quotes, right in the report, middle of the page, page 117. Very sloppy. And then as a prosecutor, you can't select the version that's the most harmful. You got to go with the version that's the most helpful in order to determine if they're evidence.
So are you suggesting McGahn is lying?
No, I'm telling you, he's confused.
So he
gave three different versions.
So let me ask you a question.
The special prosecutor comes to the conclusion he's definitively telling the truth, and his lawyer is saying that his lawyer should tell us which of those three versions is true. And how does he know which one is true now when he couldn't figure it out then?
Here's what we have. McGahn, who is well regarded in Washington, D.C., saying that he thought President Trump was telling him to fire the special
what
counsel.
he thinks is not.
But that's what he thought. He took contemporaneous notes. Good. He told his attorney at the time, and he testified.
Would you like to know what the president
thought? And he
thought?
testified under oth. President Trump is denying it. He refused to testify under oath, and he does have a history of lying. Why should people?
Well, that's your.
Was Barack Obama born in the United States? I mean, like, there's a long history of President Trump saying things that aren't true.
Was okay. Let's not go into a man's total. Did Barack Obama lie about you can keep your doctor?
We're not talking about Barack Obama. We're talking about President Trump's credibility.
Okay,
but President Trump's credibility versus
we're going to start taking disputed arguments about politics, and we're going to use it in a criminal case. That's really crazy.
If he had told him fire him, would it have been obstruction of justice?
Would not have been, but he didn't.
But he didn't do it.
The second version is about as close to the truth as you're going to get, I think. But the reality is that there are independent witnesses they didn't bother to interview who would say at that time the president was not taking the position that Mueller should be fired. In fact, Mueller was reassured that he wouldn't be fired. Right. Those witnesses were not interviewed. Second, there are witnesses that dispute that McGahn's version is correct, or a witness that disputes whether that's correct. Not false. We don't have to jump to the conclusion false. How about
when McGahn is standing by it, and he told
people...
Which
one is he standing by?
He's standing by the version in the report.
I didn't hear that from his lawyer.
He said the report, they're accurately described in the report.
There are three versions. Which one? The first one, the fire version, the second one, or the third one? There are three. We don't know which one McGahn is sticking by, and I don't really care which one McGahn is sticking by because it's so hopelessly confused. It's unfair to use that.
McGahn thought that the president was telling him to fire Special Counsel Mueller. That is the bottom line.
Wrong. And here's the way.
My question is, why should, if McGahn has a history of telling the truth, he was under oath, he took contemporaneous notes, and he told somebody contemporaneously, why should anybody believe the president?
Maybe they're too defensive. I didn't say McGahn was lying. I just, in great detail, explained to you.
You think he's confused, you said?
Hopefully confused. It cannot be relied on. If I were a prosecutor evaluating that, I got three different statements from one guy. Mm-hmm. I got a clear statement from the other guy. And the guy was never fired. I'd come to the conclusion that either this version is correct, because it's clear.
McGahn said he refused to fire him.
How about I can't? Well, I know he said that.
Right.
But if in fact, he wasn't told to fire him, that's like a tree falling in the forest.
No, he said that he took that as an order to fire him, and he refused to do it. He would have resigned.
Took it as it wasn't an order to fire him.
Let me ask you, because we're running out of time. There are 12 other investigations that have been kicked to other prosecutors, and we don't know what they are. There are 14 total, but we know what two of them are. One is Cohen, and one is Greg Craig, Obama's former chief White House counsel. Then there are 12 others we don't know. And the Mueller report also makes a point that presidents can be prosecuted once they leave office.
Those angry Democrats would love to see that.
Well, my question for you is, are you concerned as President Trump's lawyer about further legal jeopardy?
They took their best shot. That report is a one-sided document, which you're treating as gospel.
I'm treating it as a prosecutorial document, as you know.
Any prosecutorial document is a one-sided document, even if the prosecutor's fair. Mm-hmm. And when you got one who isn't, who's got a bias
You don't think Robert Mueller's fair?
I don't think his people were fair. I don't think that report is fair.
But he signed his name to it.
Well, he should never have signed his name to a document that says, on page 2, that he has to be convinced that the president didn't do it. Mm-hmm. When did a prosecutor ever have to be convinced you didn't do it? That is taking the burden of proof in America, flipping it around only on Donald Trump. He has to be able to prove that the person did it. You read that first 2 paragraphs and you understand anything about the law or the ethics of a prosecutor, that's a horrendous statement. It says he can't be, even the statement that...
So we shouldn't take this as exoneration of the president because the document is not credible.
We shouldn't take it as exoneration of the president.
You're saying that this document is not credible.
No, how about looking at it this way? People who were unfair to him, people who wrote an unfair report, people who came close to torturing people to get information and break them.
Came close to torturing people?
How about having Manafort...
Came close to torturing people?
Yes, how about having Manafort in solitary confinement and questioning him 13 times? Maybe torture is too much.
You were a prosecutor. Did you put people in solitary confinement?
To question them? Absolutely not. I put him in solitary confinement. I put one in solitary confinement because he threatened to kill me, Carmine Persico, who just died a while ago. Did I put him in solitary confinement and bring him back 13 times to question him, telling they're lying, telling them that they really knew that the president was involved in the collusion when they didn't? No, I never did that, and I'd fire anybody who did it. And Andrew Weissman never should have been working for him because Andrew Weissman is a hitman. Demonstrated.
Andrew Weissman is a hitman.
A hitman in terms of the way in which he operates.
He's an aggressive prosecutor.
Yeah, read Sidney Powell's book about how he prosecuted the people from Arthur Anderson. The case went out 9-0, Supreme Court, no crime committed, Arthur Anderson destroyed. Look at the Merrill Lynch people, kept in jail for 7 months, found innocent, and he wouldn't let them out on bail, pending appeal in a white-collar case. Look at the situations in which he withheld exculpatory evidence. This guy shouldn't have been working.
Right.
And I will amend hitman if anybody is too sensitive to that.
Well, I'm not
What I
sensitive
mean
about
is
it. I just mean...
unethical prosecutor. But you guys didn't care that he put together a staff of Hillary-loving, Trump-hating people led by an investigator who, luckily, we have his text, wanted to prevent Donald Trump from being president and wanted to remove him afterwards.
Robert Mueller, very well-regarded Republican, former head of the
Maybe he
FBI.
wasn't paying attention.
When he was appointed, Republicans, including President Trump supporters,
Me too.
like Newt Gingrich and yourself,
And then when he,
praised him.
You got it.
And he put forward a report that ultimately cleared President Trump.
And that takes every cheap shot imaginable because he couldn't prove it.
You call it cheap shots. Other people call it evidence.
But you don't just spew out all this stuff and not criticize it. Why don't we here and there how often Cohen perjured himself under oath as a way of evaluating the truthfulness of what Cohen is saying today?
Unfortunately, I have to cut you off because
if you think that's a fair document, then it's using a standard of proof that you have to absolutely prove your innocence. Then we're living in a different country other than America.
I think
and if maybe Bob didn't read that carefully, but that infects the entire document.
Well,
I mean, when people have to prove their innocence, we're in a different country. And that's the stand. And by the way, the president is innocent. He is definitely innocent of both. And why aren't people now equally interested in how about all the connections that the Hillary campaign had with Ukraine? And did that have something to do with the genesis of the information on him and
Mr. Mayor, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for being here.
Ukraine is investigating the Clinton campaign.
Happy Easter to you and your family.
For being involved with Ukraine. And that hasn't been covered by a single American newspaper, except
Russia attacked the United States. The report makes that clear. You agree with that?
And the President of the United States was falsely accused of being involved in a crime tantamount to treason. That's a disgrace. And somebody has to have an equal enthusiasm about finding the truth of that. Otherwise, you are prejudiced.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, thank you so much. Happy Easter. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it.